Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into the quiet, echoing world of medieval castle life, but not from the warhorse's saddle or the king's tent. No, tonight we slip behind the battlements, into the shadowed corridors where time itself forgets how to move. See, most stories about the Middle Ages roar they clang with swords and sermons, but this one waits, this one sits, this one listens. Here's something you probably never noticed: castles. Those towering symbols of power and legacy were never really built for the people who stayed behind. They were made for the men who left, and so they echo with a very different kind of silence, the silence of women who kept the hearth burning while husbands rode into the fog of war and history. There's nothing dramatic about it, and that's what makes it brutal. You might think this story will be soft, that waiting is a kind of peace, but you probably won't survive this kind of waiting. It claws from the inside out. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing the map of this little bedtime circle. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the stone floor barefoot, flinching at the chill like you always do, but refusing to show it. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster screams not a pleasant farmyard crow, but a shrill scratch that sounds like it's been woken against its will. You know the feeling. In this castle, the cold wakes before you do. It climbs up from the foundation, through your bones, and settles just beneath your skin. You pull your shawl tighter. Though the fabric has long since stopped helping, the hearth has burned out again. But you don't call for the servant girl. Let her sleep. Let someone dream. There are no fires in your dreams lately, only flickers of armor, of blood, of the way his hand hovered over yours the morning he left. The sun hasn't risen, but your body knows the rhythm. It always does. You trace the same path through the same corridor, your steps landing exactly where they did yesterday. You pass by the mural of Saint Margaret slaying the dragon. You've stared at her so long, her painted eyes seem to shift. Sometimes she looks like she's about to cry. Sometimes she looks like she's about to scream. You understand both expressions. A forgotten fringe detail. Some say Saint Margaret wasn't real. Just a fabrication stitched together to comfort women who were told to stay still. Kind of ironic. Really. You keep walking. At the landing, you pause before the small wooden bench tucked under the narrow window. It's nothing but a slit in the stone wall meant for archers, not wives. But you sit there anyway. You watch the blue creep into the sky. Watch the clouds roll in like ships without anchors. You know every shape they become, every illusion they cast across the hills. Sometimes you think you see his silhouette against the horizon, just a speck of shadow in the distance. But it's never him. Of course it's not. Historians still argue whether men of your husband's rank ever came home at all, or if the letters claiming their glorious deaths were just recycled scripts sent to every grieving castle. But no one debates the women. Women are always presumed present, silent, decorative. You let your fingers rest on the stone windowsill, worn smooth by generations of waiting. There's a little notch in the corner, carved like a crescent moon. It wasn't there when you were a girl. You put it there, a childish mark made with a hairpin on the third night he was gone. You whispered it was to remind the stars of your name, in case he asked. You were foolish then, hopeful. Now it's just a hollow groove you trace with your thumb, not because it means anything, but because it's what your hand remembers to do. Behind you, the castle begins to wake. Distant clatters from the kitchen, low voices from the courtyard, someone muttering a prayer too loud, as if trying to make God feel guilty for sleeping in. You don't turn around. You've learned to hold this moment for as long as it lets you. It's the only part of the day that still feels like yours. Soon, you'll be expected to walk the grounds, to nod at the steward, to inspect the kitchens and pretend you care how many geese survived the frost. You'll perform a version of yourself, dutiful, mild, beautifully unbroken. But right now, you're still something half-formed. You're still his. You close your eyes, behind the lids. You can still see the last time you touched him. It wasn't romantic. It was clumsy and brief. In front of too many soldiers, you held his cloak while he adjusted the sword strap. Your hands brushed his. He looked down and almost smiled. almost. He never liked long goodbyes. He thought they were curses. You let him leave quickly. You didn't cry until he was already part of the fog. You open your eyes again. The fog's here today, low and thick, blanketing the fields like unspoken words. Somewhere out there are bones and banners, either rotting or rising. But here, in this stone cage, dressed up like a home, there's only the space he left behind. You think of all the women in other towers, other castles, doing the exact same thing. You wonder if they're crying into their sewing, or writing letters that will never be sent. You once met a woman at your cousin's wedding who whispered that she baked her husband's name into bread dough every day so she wouldn't forget how it felt on her tongue. You didn't know whether to laugh or feel sick. Maybe both. A bell rings soft and delayed. It's not time for anything, really. The bell is old and cracked, like most of the people who still live here, but it tolls anyway, habit or memory. You rise slowly because you're noble, and nobles rise as if gravity doesn't apply to them. That's the rule. Even when it hurts, even when you want to lie down right there on the stone and scream like the rooster, you don't. You stand, you smooth your gown, and you descend the spiral staircase with the dignity of a widow, though you're still technically a wife. Technically, at the bottom, the maid bows slightly. She's young. Her eyes dart like mice in torchlight. "Would you like the fire lit, my lady?" she asks, already knowing the answer. You nod anyway. It gives her something to do. It gives you something to watch. The spark, the flicker, the illusion that warmth is coming. It never lasts, but for now, it's enough. You sit before the mirror, not out of vanity, but ritual disguised as routine, and routine disguised as survival. The glass is slightly warped, its reflection dimmed by age and dust. Like it too has grown tired of its role. You pick up the carved wooden comb and drag it through your hair, slowly, as if each stroke might conjure his face from memory. You have to be careful. Snags now feel like injuries, and your scalp has become more tender since the winter he left. Your hair, once brushed by another hand, now answers only to yours. You twist it, pin it, and twist it again, not because it pleases you, but because you've done it every morning for years, and the day refuses to start without it. A small pile of pins rests in a dish beside your brush, shaped like silver thorns. They were a wedding gift. You hated them at first. Now they feel like a crown, not of beauty, but of endurance. Behind you, the fire grumbles in its stone throat. It's been fed, for now. The servant girl left an hour ago with bowed head and downcast eyes, like she had witnessed something private by simply lighting your room. You didn't speak to her, but you nodded. It was a kind nod. That's the role you play here, the quiet lady. Noble in grief, generous in gestures. People watch you closely. They want to know how to behave in your presence. They want to be reassured that you're not about to unravel. The castle needs you to stay folded neatly into your place. You rise and wrap the sash around your waist. It was his sash, once, crimson with a golden knot. You wore it the day he left. The fabric still holds the ghost of his scent, salt, sweat, something faintly like pine. You remember leaning into his shoulder once, years before the war, after a summer ride through the orchard. You buried your face in that scent and forgot what you were crying about. You wish you could do that again. But now, the fabric is thinner, worn soft by years of clutching. It ties around your waist with less resistance, as if it knows you've grown smaller. You walk to the corner shelf where the household relics sit. A small carved saint, a bit of candle wax molded into the shape of an angel, a cracked bit of painted tile that might once have lined the Jerusalem walls. You whisper a greeting to Saint Agnes out of habit. You've stopped asking for things, though requests feel greedy now. What would you ask for anyway? A return? A resurrection? A letter that wasn't smudged or suspect. You press your lips to the saint's feet. You don't believe it helps, but you do it anyway. It's not about faith anymore. It's about fidelity to habit, to memory, to the role carved for you like a niche in the chapel wall. The cracked icon sits slightly behind the relics. You never moved it, even after it fell. It's an image of the Madonna, once vibrant, now dulled with smoke and age. Her eyes used to look kind. Now they just look tired. One corner is broken clean off, and you keep the missing shard in your jewelry box, tucked beneath the brooch he gave you the first spring you were married. You don't look at either of them much. You just like knowing they're there. Historians still argue whether medieval women kept such small altars out of devotion or desperation, or whether those two things were ever truly separate. You lean toward the latter. A breeze seeps in through the shutter cracks. The castle walls may be thick, but they're not invincible. You learned that the first time the outer rampart was breached not by an enemy, but by a flood. The stones swelled with water. Mold crept into corners where candles died. You remember scrubbing the floor in silence while your husband shouted about repairs from the parapet. He wasn't angry at you. He was angry at the vulnerability of stone. That memory makes you smile. Briefly. It's a crooked smile, like something stolen. You step into the corridor. The torch sconces are cold now, only daylight trickles in through the small arched windows. Dust swims through the light like dancers. You walk past a tapestry of St. George slaying the dragon, then another of Judith with her sword and her silent gaze. You've looked at these women your whole life. Sometimes you wonder if they'd even recognize you as one of them. You never slayed a beast. You've only outlived them. At the end of the hall, you pause at the door to the solar. It's your room, a woman's space, too warm in summer, too cold in winter, always just slightly too quiet. The embroidery frame sits in the corner where you left it, and on the cushion lies the half-finished vine you started 6 weeks ago. You were going to add roses. Now you think you'll stop. You don't like the idea of flowers blooming into nothing. You sit anyway, not to sew, just to sit. The light falls across your lap like a veil. Outside, you hear the far-off bray of a donkey. Someone curses. Someone else laughs. You stay still. The world can move without you. You glance at the tiny carved chest beside your chair. Inside are all the letters. All of them. Some were written by him, some for him. Some maybe not even from him. It's hard to tell. The ink smudges. The handwriting changes. You told yourself they were hurried, dictated, scribbled in tense, rain smudged. That's why some felt different. But deep down, you know one wasn't his. The phrasing was off. He never used the word ardent. That letter came 6 months after the last real one. You kept it anyway. You read it sometimes. You even pretended to reply once. You reach for your ring, still on your finger, thinner now than when he slipped it on, because you stopped eating for a while. Then you started again, because starving isn't noble, and besides, someone has to tell the cook how many leeks to use. You think of the meal you'll eat tonight. Pottage again? Probably. Maybe a bit of fish. You haven't tasted anything in months. Not really. But eating is a performance. It proves you're still alive. You chew, you swallow, you nod politely. You compliment the spice, even when there is none. You rise again. The day stretches ahead of you like a tapestry, yet to be woven predictable in its patterns. Fraying slightly at the edges, you'll walk the inner yard. You'll watch the hens peck at frost. You'll say a word or two to the steward, just enough to confirm you're sane. The steward's wife will ask again if you've heard news. You'll say no, and she'll lower her eyes like she's embarrassed for you. The stonemason will bow too deeply. The falconer will avoid your gaze. Everyone respects you too much to speak honestly. That's the worst part. You want someone to scream, to shake you, to say, "He's dead. Let go." But they don't, because he might not be, because you might still be waiting. You walk back down the hallway, footsteps echoing louder than they should. You pass your reflection in a tarnished wall mirror. You glance at it, briefly. You look like a queen who misplaced her crown and forgot to tell anyone. You touch your cheek, then your hair. You wonder, for a moment, if he'd still recognize you. You're not sure. You barely recognize yourself most days. The chapel bell rings again. It's later now. You turn toward the stairs. Another day has opened, like a book with pages you already know. You walk toward it anyway. That's what waiting means. That's what you do. You sit at the high table alone again, though no one dares call it that out loud. It's always the morning meal, or my lady's breakfast, as if words could fill chairs. The steward bows and retreats, leaving you surrounded by steam and silverware. The food is the same as it was yesterday, and the day before, And all the days before, that coarse bread softened in warm milk, a scattering of herbs, a poached egg that breaks too easily. You force yourself to tear off a piece of the bread, though it feels like chewing a memory. You used to dine beside him, sometimes in silence, sometimes while he muttered about crop yields or weather patterns as if they were enemy strategies. You used to nudge his foot under the table just to break the mood. Now your feet rest still on the cold flagstones, touching no one. The dog that once sat loyally at his side has vanished. Either dead or stolen, neither would surprise you. You drink the wine because water feels too transparent today. You let it sit on your tongue, hoping it numbs something, but it never does. The servant girl asks if you'd like more. She knows you won't. You shake your head gently, as if her question deserved a more thoughtful answer. She curtsies, lifts the tray, and disappears again. The hall is too large for one woman. Every clink of plate and echo of footstep becomes an accusation. The banners on the wall hang like judgment. One still bears your family's crest, though the colors have faded with time and firelight. You remember when they were new when you were new, and how proud you were to see it flutter beside his. It felt like joining something eternal. Now you wonder if you were just another emblem stitched to be forgotten. You turn your head and look toward the window. The view is unchanging, a sliver of sky, a distant wood, the shadow of the training yard. There used to be noise there, clanging, laughing, shouts of mock battle. Now there's only the occasional scrape of a shovel, or the sauve bray of a donkey pulling firewood. You squint, searching for movement, a sign, a shape, anything. Once, you thought you saw his horse from that window, tall, proud, restless. You nearly dropped your goblet, but it was just a traveler, lost and asking for water. You gave him a night's lodging and refused to ask if he carried news. You didn't want news. News was dangerous. Silence, at least, could be molded into hope. You rise from your seat with practiced grace. Your hand brushes the carved table as you pass, trailing fingers over the grain. He once carved a small mark into it, right near the end, his version of a joke. A tiny sword etched in with a butter knife, back when you were still learning each other's faces in candlelight. You smile faintly and walk past it. Some memories are too delicate to look at straight. If you face them head on, they vanish like breath on cold glass. You walk through the corridor toward the herb garden. You pass a few servants along the way. They bow. You nod. That's the exchange. One nod means all is well, even when it's not. Two nods mean yes, you've heard the rumor, and no, you won't address it. Three nods, well, that one's reserved for when something needs burying. And fast. You've only done it twice. Once for a stillborn lamb in the chapel courtyard. Once for a broken necklace you pretended not to recognize. You enter the garden gate, inhale the scent of sage and marjoram, and pretend it still smells like summer. But it doesn't. It smells like damp soil and too much remembering. The herbs are overgrown. You should have them trimmed, but you don't, because he liked them wild. He said they looked like freedom that way. You pluck a sprig of rosemary and roll it between your fingers. It's supposed to help with memory. You've read that in a book once, or maybe heard it from the priest. You're not sure. The scent is sharp, too sharp. You drop it. Let it fall. The wind will carry it somewhere better. You notice a beetle crawling along the stone edge of the planter, black, glossy, determined. You wonder if insects mourn. You wonder if their rituals mean anything. You once watched an ant drag a dead companion back to a crack in the wall for over an hour. You cheered it on like a lunatic. Anything to pass the time? Historians still argue whether castle gardens served more as medicine chests or places of meditation. You'd argue they were both. You found more comfort here than in any sermon. You bend and brush the soil with your hand, then rise and shake it off. You head toward the inner courtyard. The pigeons cluster near the well again, flapping and cooing like old women at market. You wonder if they've forgotten how to fly. You envy them. A few boys run past chasing a hoop. One of them looks at you too long. He doesn't bow, just stares. You stare back until he trips. You walk on. Children remind you of time, and time is impolite these days. You pass the armory, now mostly empty. Dust hangs in the air like regret. A single spear leans against the door frame. It's crooked, bent, maybe from the last hunt. He never liked hunting. Did he? Said it felt like war without the meaning? You never told him war felt like absence without the clarity. You glance inside. The light catches a glint of steel. For a moment, you imagine it's his sword, returned, but it's just a broken blade, dulled and pitted with rust. You walk faster. Back in the hall, the steward finds you. He clears his throat. A merchant has arrived, he says. He brings silks from the south. You raise an eyebrow. And he says one was meant for your lord husband. The words hang between you like wet laundry. Dripping, indecent. You nod once. Let him leave it. I'll look later. The steward bows and backs away. You don't look at him. You don't ask questions. You've learned that men who bring silks also bring gossip. And gossip carries more blood than cloth ever could. You walk to your chamber and shut the door. You lean your back against it and listen. Nothing. That's the cruel thing about castles. They echo with everything except what you need. You sink into the window seat and stare outside again. Somewhere, women are laughing. Not here. Not in this stone echo of a life. You reach into the pocket of your gown and pull out the ring again. You roll it between your fingers. Not to feel it. Just to remember it exists. The fire in your room has burned low. You don't stoke it. Let the cold in. Let it press against your skin like a question you don't want to answer. You think of the other women waiting in other towers, brushing their hair, smoothing their skirts, hiding their cracks. You wonder how many of them still believe, or if belief is just another room you forget how to enter. You exhale, slowly, as if the breath might carry you with it, but it doesn't. You're still here, still waiting, and the bread on your plate still tastes like ashes. You lean against the cold window frame again, forehead to stone, eyes fixed on the path that cuts through the trees like a scar. That path once brought riders. It once kicked up dust and scattered geese and sent squires running to prepare for arrival. Now it just sits there, empty, like a broken promise. You check it every morning anyway, as if you're not already familiar with the shape of disappointment. Sometimes you imagine hoofbeats, low and rhythmic, approaching slowly like a heartbeat in your chest, but it's never real. It's just the wind tumbling through the trees like a lazy liar. You blink, still nothing. Only two pigeons fighting over a twig, and the old guard dog wheezing in the shade. You've stopped expecting letters, but you haven't stopped hoping for them. And that's worse, isn't it? Hoping without expecting, like breathing underwater, knowing air won't come, but doing it anyway, because what else can you do? You remember the last letter clearly, the one that was real. You remember because he signed it with your name, tucked into a sentence as though it belonged there. He wrote, "Tell the kitchen I miss the bread, and tell Elena that I still see her in the firelight." You read that sentence until the ink bled into your eyes. It was short, too short, like it was written in a hurry. You imagined him with one arm wrapped in bandage, a candle guttering beside him, scribbling in a corner of a damp tent while other men sharpened blades. You imagined it so often you could almost smell the wax, but it was real. You held it to your lips, as if that could press your breath into the page. Then came nothing. Weeks, months, and then a new letter, one that felt thinner, colder, written by someone mimicking affection. It said he was alive, that he would write again, that he was safe. But you knew, didn't you? Something about the slant of the letters? He never looped his Y that way. You noticed. You always noticed. Historians still argue whether nobles dictated their own letters, or left the task to scribes in times of fatigue. You know the answer. He didn't write that one. You told no one, not even the chaplain, who always tried to coax you into confession with his gentle inquiries. He asked once too often, and you told him, very calmly, that if God wanted your words, he could find you himself. He hasn't tried since. Instead, you go through the motions. You light the candle beneath the crucifix. You kneel when the bells ring. You mouth the prayers while staring at the cracks in the stone wall. But your heart, it listens only when the wind whispers, or when the doves on the window ledge coo like mourning women. They stopped bringing letters after that second one. You waited, at first, marking the days with thread on the embroidery frame, one thread per day, blue for silence, red for rumors. You stopped when the blue overtook the entire border. You told the maid to fold it and tuck it away. It now sits beneath your bed, hidden like a failed spell. Sometimes you think the absence of words is louder than the words themselves. Sometimes you think silence might be trying to say something, but you're just not fluent in its language. You've heard other women forge their husbands' letters. It started as a whisper during a feast 2 winters ago, passed from a countess with wine-dark lips to a bored duchess fingering her rings. She writes them herself. They said, even stamps them with mud to make it look authentic. One even claimed to burn the corners for realism. At first, you were disgusted. The idea felt like betrayal. But later, in bed, when you stared at the ceiling's wooden beams, you began to understand. It wasn't deception, it was preservation. What do you do when the person who made you feel real vanishes into mist? You recreate them, piece by piece, stroke by stroke, word by desperate word. But you haven't done it. Not yet. Your hands tremble too much when you hold a quill now. Not from fear, from restraint. The steward once offered to write one for you, carefully and without fanfare. He said it would make the servants worry less. You told him to go to the stable and count the horses instead. That was the end of that conversation. But still, there's parchment in your drawer, ink, a seal, just in case. You hear hooves now, real ones. You freeze. Not the clatter of supply wagons or the lazy shuffle of peasant carts. These are brisk, confident, urgent. You rush to the window. A rider, alone. Brown cloak, muddy boots, no crest visible. You squint. You squint so hard your eyes ache. Is it him? Is it? You lean against the stone. The rider slows, dismounts. He doesn't look up. He speaks to the guard, hands over something small, wrapped in cloth. Then he turns and leaves. Just like that. Your breath stops in your throat like a swallowed pebble. An hour later, the steward brings you a pouch. It contains a dagger, his dagger, the one you gave him when he first rode out, ivory handle. The initials you carved with your own needlepoint knife, still faintly visible. You almost laugh. You almost scream. You do neither. You nod, dismiss the steward, and sit quietly while the world folds inward. You hold the dagger in your lap. It's clean. That's suspicious. Too clean. A soldier's blade should come home dirty, bloodied, battered. This one gleams like it never left, which means someone cleaned it, which means someone chose what you'd see. You wonder if the writer ever knew your name, or if he was just told, deliver this to the widow. That word clings, widow. But no one has said it aloud yet, because no one has proof. And without a body, you're still married. Legally, emotionally, that depends on the hour. You press your thumb against the blade's edge. It's still sharp, fitting. The object he used to protect you could now just as easily open a vein. Not that you do it. Not out of despair, but out of curiosity. What does it feel like to be the one who leaves? To stop waiting, to step out of the frame of the painting and into the wind. You set the blade aside. That's not your path. Yours is slower. Your pain doesn't spill. It seeps, like water through stone. Evening falls. You light the candles yourself tonight. No need to summon the girl. You want the silence. The ritual. One candle for the hearth, one for the chapel alcove, one for the space on your pillow where his shadow used to lie. You sit on the edge of the bed and listen to the flames. They crackle like bones in frost. The smell of wax calms you. You lean back slowly, carefully. You stare at the ceiling, at the beam where he once hung a small trinket from a battle standard. It's gone now. Taken down during the last cleaning. You didn't ask for it to be removed. Someone just assumed. That's the worst part when they stop asking. You curl beneath the coverlet. You don't cry. Not because you're brave, but because you're too tired. The kind of tired that settles in your marrow. Like winter deciding to stay. You close your eyes and tell yourself you'll check the path again tomorrow. You will. You always do. Just in case. The loom waits for you the same way you wait for him still. Silent. Never questioning the passing of days, you sit before it, legs tucked beneath the bench, fingertips already stained with fine dust from the threads that have gone untouched for too long. It's a faithful thing, your loom, more reliable than the men who go to war or the letters that never arrive. You thread the shuttle through without thinking, the rhythm returning to your hands as if no time had passed. In a way, it hasn't. The castle steals all concept of time, melts it down into tasks and shadows, and here, within this little square of wood and thread, you pretend you have control. You can choose color, you can choose pace, you cannot choose whether he returns, but you can choose whether this cloth becomes a tapestry or a shroud. You smile at that thought, a dark, curling thing that blooms inside your ribs. Historians still argue whether noblewomen's weaving was truly an act of artistry or merely duty in disguise. You could settle the debate. You know the answer, it's neither. It's therapy. You weave memory into each pass of the shuttle, his laugh, when the cook dropped a bowl of cherries, the rasp of his beard on your collarbone, the time he claimed your eyes looked like a storm had just passed. You hated that metaphor, but you never corrected him. You wanted him to keep describing you like weather. You twist the thread, press it down, create symmetry where none exists in your heart. The last thing he touched before leaving was this loom. He ran his hand over the wood and joked that you should make him a cape so glorious. The enemy would surrender at the sight of it. You promised you would. You haven't. You won't. He was always too proud for capes. The threads snap sometimes, and each one feels like a nerve giving out. You fix them patiently. You don't curse, don't sigh. You simply tie a new knot and keep going. You've become very good at knots, not just in thread, but in thought. You can tie off grief so tightly it barely bleeds anymore. You can bind fear until it pulses quiet, but longing that one slips through always has. It winds through the cloth like a silver thread you never meant to use. The maid brings your tea without being asked. She knows the hour now. She leaves it by the window, careful not to disturb your work. You appreciate her silence. She's young enough not to understand what waiting means, but wise enough not to pretend she does. Once, you thought of warning her, telling her that love is a thing that disappears in armor, that promises rust faster than swords. But what would be the point? Let her have her illusions. You had yours. You drank them like wine. You still remember the taste. Outside, the fog rolls in again. The castle grounds vanish into milk. The world feels smaller when you can't see its edges. You like that. It means you can pretend he's just beyond the mist, that he's walking the path home but taking his time because he's composing the right words to say. You imagine him rehearsing apologies under his breath. You imagine him older, with lines on his face and stories he's ashamed to tell. You imagine too much, but what else is there to do? You lean forward, stretching your back, the loom creaking like a ship's hull. Your body has changed. Your hands, once soft, are calloused now. Your shoulders have slumped from years of bending forward. You still wear silk under your gown, out of habit, but the lace at your cuffs has frayed. No one notices. No one looks closely enough. You used to care. You used to adjust your veil just so, to charm him. You used to perfume your wrists with crushed lavender. Now you smell like wood and wool and quiet. You think of the wives who had lovers while their husbands marched to war. That old tale, every village has one. A baroness who grew bored, a merchant's wife who invited the baker's son through the kitchen door. You used to judge them. Now, not so much. Now, you understand that solitude is not holy. It's just prolonged absence dressed in linen. You haven't taken a lover, but you've thought about it. Not with desire, no, not that, but with curiosity. Would someone's breath on your neck remind you of your own heartbeat? Or would it feel like betrayal? You don't know. You probably never will. That kind of scandal has no place here. Not in these walls. Not with these eyes watching. You finish a row of weaving and pause. The cloth has taken on a strange shape, narrow, tightly woven in the middle, loose at the edges. You frown. It's not a pattern you intended. You trace your finger along the uneven edge. It looks like a body hunched in prayer, or mourning, or both. You consider unraveling it, but you don't. You decide to leave it. Not everything has to be perfect. Some things need to be left ruined. It feels more honest that way. The door creaks open slightly. The steward peeks in, hesitant. There's a peddler in the outer bailey, he says. Says he has cloth from the east. Rare patterns, gold thread. You nod slowly. Tell him I'll send someone. You don't care about gold thread. Gold doesn't warm a bed. You watch the steward leave, his back stiff, as if worried you might change your mind and follow. He's been more cautious lately. You think he suspects that something inside you is shifting, like frost before it breaks. You return to your loom. One more row, one more line. It's like breathing now, inhale. Pass the shuttle, exhale, press the weft. The rhythm calms your nerves. You think of the legend of Philomela, the woman who wove her suffering into cloth when her tongue was cut out. You remember reading that as a child, shivering beneath the blanket while your tutor tried to explain it. You didn't understand then. You do now. Not every voice is spoken. Not every scream needs sound. The light begins to fade. You don't light a candle yet. You let the dusk enter the room. Let it blur the edges of the fabric until it becomes indistinguishable from the past. Your hands rest on the loom. Your spine aches. You could sit here all night. You've done it before. The only time you feel like yourself is when you're halfway between creating and remembering. The maid returns, timidly. Would you like supper brought, my lady? You shake your head. You're not hungry. You haven't been hungry in weeks. Not really. Hunger feels distant, like an emotion you used to have. She curtsies, leaves again. Her eyes linger too long. She worries, but says nothing. They always say nothing. You rise, finally. When your legs begin to cramp, you stretch. The loom creaks in protest. You touch it lightly in thanks, a habit you developed during the second winter alone. You didn't want to take its loyalty for granted. You still don't. You walk to the window. The fog has thickened. You can see nothing now, not even the edge of the stable. You imagine the entire world has vanished, and only this castle remains. You, the loom, the silence. You press your forehead to the cold glass. It welcomes you, like always. And somewhere inside you, a thread snaps. The storm begins with a low murmur that folds into the stone like a whisper from the past. You hear it before anyone else does. That far-off rumble that doesn't belong to carts or hooves or servants dropping buckets. It belongs to the sky. You pause in the corridor, your hand still resting on the carved banister where the wood is worn smooth by generations of cautious descent. You wait, listening. There it is again, closer now. A shudder that ripples through the castle's bones. The wind arrives next, rattling the shutters and moaning under the archways like an old man scolding ghosts. You wrap your shawl tighter around your shoulders and move toward the hall, where you know the windows are weakest. One has already cracked once this winter. If it breaks again, the snow will creep in before anyone notices. It always finds the quiet places first. You reach the tall windows and look out, though there's nothing to see now but trees bending like they're apologizing, and the gray swirl of a sky losing its temper. The storm has arrived without invitation, without mercy, much like war, much like grief. Servants rush past you, carrying cloaks and wood, voices rising in barely contained panic. They pretend they're calm, but you know better. Storms make them nervous, not just because of what might break, but because they reveal how vulnerable a castle truly is. Stone walls mean nothing if the roof surrenders. The steward appears beside you, panting slightly, eyes darting like he's lost something. The west gate, he says, not even bothering to bow. It's come loose again. You nod. Fix it. We'll need more hands. You nod again. He's waiting for something else permission. Reassurance. Perhaps a moment of shared fear, but you give him nothing. He leaves. Boots thudding against the flags like the beat of an anxious heart. You watch the storm dig in its heels. Thunder now. Sharp, close. The windows shudder in their frames. Somewhere down the corridor, a child shrieks. Not yours. You've never had children. That's the part they don't tell you about waiting. It turns your womb to stone faster than age ever could. You turn from the window and walk back toward the chapel. It's where you always go when the walls start to hum. like they might remember something you've tried to forget. The torch sconces flicker as you pass, the flames guttering with each new gust that snakes through the cracks. You don't rush. You never rush. Rushing invites chaos. At the chapel door, you pause. The heavy oak is slightly ajar. That's unusual. You push it open with your fingertips, slowly, as if expecting it to scream. It doesn't. Just groans softly, like it's tired. You step inside. The air is heavy with wax and damp stone, but there's something else today, something metallic. Not blood, not quite, but close. Your eyes scan the room. Candles still flicker beside the altar. The Virgin stares down, impassive, but something is wrong. The side door, it's open. A wind stirs through the pews like a warning. You walk toward it, carefully. On the ground near the threshold lies a piece of broken chainmail. Slick with water, you crouch to touch it. Still warm. That's not good. You stand and step outside. The cloister beyond is mostly shielded from the storm, but the wind has found its way here too, and so is someone else. A riderless horse stands tethered to the pillar, flanks heaving, eyes wild, no saddle, no banner, just a beast shivering in a space meant for silence. You approach it slowly. It startles but doesn't bolt. There's blood on the flank, a smear, nothing more. You place your hand on its neck, whisper to it. No response, no name carved into its bit. It's not his horse. You turn toward the cloister garden and spot movement. A figure, crouched beside the old shrine to St. Eustace. He looks up, a man, cloaked, bearded, blood-streaked, but not wounded, not limping. He stands slowly. You step back. Who are you? You ask. He doesn't answer. You're not supposed to be here. Still silence. Then he speaks. Voice hoarse from wind or memory. I knew him. That's all he says. You feel the chill before the words sink in. Knew, not know. Past tense. You swallow. Where you ask. North. Near the river crossing. Heat. We were ambushed. You step forward, but the ground feels like it's leaning away from you. Where is he? The man looks down. Gone. He doesn't say how. He doesn't say when. Just gone. Like a child losing a toy. He reaches into his cloak and pulls out something wrapped in cloth. Your heart knows before your eyes do. It's his belt, the one he wore into battle. The clasp is broken. You take it from the stranger with numb hands. Thank you, you whisper, though it tastes wrong in your mouth. He nods and turns to leave, already fading back into the storm. You don't stop him. Some ghosts wear faces. Back inside, you sit on the chapel bench, belt across your knees. You stare at the worn leather, the familiar fray at the edge where he used to fidget with his gloves. You press your hand to it, still warm. You think of all the things he didn't say. The promises unkept, the prayers unanswered. Historians still argue whether women like you ever received formal notice, or if closure was a myth reserved for queens. You know now, there's no closure, only objects. Thunder shakes the windows again. The candle beside you falls, wax splashing across your skirt. You don't flinch, you just watch it harden. A servant enters, sees your face, and leaves again. You wonder what she'll tell the others, that you were serene shattered. Speaking to the Virgin, let them guess, let the rumors multiply like shadows. You're tired of correcting the narrative. You rise slowly, belt in hand. You walk back to your chamber without acknowledging anyone. The storm still rages outside, but you move like the eye of it, calm, cold, inevitable. In your room, you place the belt beside the dagger on your writing desk. Relics now, your private altar. You sit beside them and stare. You could light a candle. You could pray, but you don't. Instead, you begin to hum. A tune from childhood. A lullaby your mother used to sing before the plague took her. It's off-key. That feels appropriate. You look to the window, where the storm has begun to wane. The wind now sounds more like sighing. The trees bend less violently. You see your reflection in the glass. Not a widow, not a wife, just A woman with too many objects and not enough answers. You press your forehead to the pain again. Somewhere, the storm has moved on. But here, it lingers. The night arrives on a morning that smells like wet stone and distant rot. You hear the hooves first heavy, deliberate, unhurried. Not the clatter of a messenger, not the stagger of a traveler lost in rain. These are practiced hooves, armored, confident. The courtyard echoes with them, as though the stone itself is being warned. You step into the corridor, one hand resting on the wall to steady your body before your face, because it is your face that must be ready. You've been watched for too long to forget that. Women like you don't greet guests, you embody them. The steward meets you halfway up the stairs, voice tight with reverence and a quiet, rehearsed nervousness. A knight, my lady, says he rode under your lord husband. That phrase again, rode under, like he was always lesser, obedient, safe. You say nothing, just nod, and continue to the great hall. You feel the weight of your gown like a costume you can't take off. He's already inside when you arrive, peeling back his soaked leather gloves one finger at a time, like he's undressing an idea. His cloak is muddied, and he doesn't bow deeply enough. He looks around the room first, assessing tapestries, floors, exits. Then he looks at you, and you already know. This one doesn't come to mourn. This one comes to claim. His beard is trimmed too neatly for a battlefield. His boots too new. His hands too clean. He was never under your husband. He was beside him, perhaps, or just behind him, waiting for the right angle. You descend the stairs slowly, every step a syllable in a sentence you haven't written yet. He speaks first. My lady, I bring his shield. He gestures, and a squire barely out of boyhood steps forward with a battered piece of iron and leather. You recognize it by the scrape on the left side, where he struck it against the wall during a drunken argument about lineage. You don't touch it. Thank you, you say, coldly. The knight smiles, like he expected tears and is disappointed to find composure instead. He places the shield down gently, performatively, as though laying a body at your feet. I rode with him through the last campaign, he says. A brave man, honorable, you nod, and dead. That stops him, briefly. Then he smiles again, slower this time. Yes, a great loss. His voice lingers on great, as if the word could stretch into a proposal. You do not return the smile. You turn away and motion to the servant to bring wine. Not for you, for him. If this is going to be a performance, it will at least have props. He accepts the goblet without hesitation, drinks too quickly, tries to recover. I took it upon myself to deliver the shield personally. I thought it fitting. He would have wanted it here, in your care. You want to laugh. He has no idea what your husband wanted. He's using words like honor and care, like they're passwords into your grief. But he doesn't know the shape of it. He doesn't know that grief in a castle isn't loud, it's methodical. It sets the table. It balances the books. It asks the steward about the weather, even when it's howling just outside the windows. Was he in pain, you ask? Without looking? The knight pauses. It was quick. A lie. You don't believe it, but you appreciate the effort. Did he speak of home? The knight sets the goblet down. Only once. The night before, he mentioned your name. You turn to face him, eyes steady. What did he say? The knight hesitates. This is where the lie is supposed to land gracefully, wrapped in poetry. He said, tell her the stars are the same here. You almost flinch, not because the words are painful, but because they are too perfect. Your husband never spoke like that. He used to curse the stars for being too dim to navigate by. He once called them useless decorations. You remember that. You remember everything. So you nod. How poetic. The night shifts. He expected tears. Instead, you offer him silence. The room grows thick with it. He tries again. He asked me to look after you, should the worst occur, and there it is. The curtain drawn back. The real reason he's here. He wants what remains, not the shield, not the dagger, not even your husband's name. He wants the estate, the title, the woman. Maybe, You feel your stomach tighten not with fear, but rage. Not hot rage, cold, slow, ancient. The kind of rage that tapestries are stitched with. You step toward the shield and run your fingers along its edge, not lovingly, assessing. Then I thank you for your duty, Sir Alaric, he offers. Of course it's Alaric, a name too heroic for a man with too much calculation in his eyes. Alaric, you repeat, you've done well, and now you may go. He blinks. He wasn't expecting dismissal. I, my lady, I have no quarters arranged. Then ride to the priory. I'm sure the monks will be grateful for your company. He recovers, barely. I only meant to pay my respects. And you have. Take the shield with you. His brows furrow. I thought it should stay. It will. In my memory, not in my hall. He stands. His smile now more of a grimace. You are strong, he says. Like it's a compliment. Like he means hard. No, you reply. Voice soft but absolute. I am occupied. He bows then, a real one this time. But it's too late. You turn before he finishes, walk away from the clink of his boots on your stone floor. Later, the steward finds you by the fire, embroidery in your lap, untouched. He's gone, the steward says. You nod. Burn the linens, my lady. The ones he touched, burn them, and the cup. The steward hesitates. Do it, you say. He bows and leaves. The fire pops behind you, spitting sparks into the air. You think of how many times a widow has had to fend off a vulture with a charming voice. Historians still argue whether these nights offered protection or predation. You no longer wonder. You know. You rise and walk to your bedchamber. On the pillow lies your husband's sash. You placed it there weeks ago, on a whim, to see if it still smelled like him. It doesn't. It smells like linen and dust and time. You sit on the edge of the bed and hold it loosely in your hands. You remember how he wrapped it around your eyes once, joking that you'd be a blindfolded bride. You remember how you laughed, even though you hated not being able to see. You keep your eyes open now, always. Outside, the wind has stilled, the storm has passed, but inside, the air still carries a scent, not of the night, not of fear, of decision. Something has hardened in you, something that no longer waits, but watches. From this day forward, no man enters your hall without answering a question you haven't asked. You may be a widow, but you are still the castle. You slip into the chapel alone that night, carrying nothing but a small candle and the ache in your ribs that never entirely goes away. The stone presses inward around you, silent as always, though tonight its silence feels sharper, less like stillness, and more like breath held in fear. You've stopped asking the Virgin for anything, but you still visit her. She waits there in the same corner, her painted eyes soft with a mercy you've never quite trusted. You walk past the pews, each one polished smooth by centuries of knees, until you reach the front where the candlelight licks the hem of her blue robe. You kneel, not out of devotion, but tradition, as if your body still knows how to fold itself into reverence, even when your faith no longer fits. You light the candle and whisper your husband's name once, not because you think she'll carry it to him, but because you're tired of being the only one who says it. The wax drips slowly, forming a tiny mountain of melted devotion at the base of the iron stand. You watch it build, watch the flame lean gently to one side, like it's listening. You try to listen, to the stone, the dark, the flicker. But there's only your heartbeat and the rustling of your own sleeves as your hands fidget in your lap. You remember the last time you prayed for real. It was the night he left, when his horse stood restless beneath the tower, and you gripped the railing so tightly your knuckles turned white. You prayed that he would return unchanged, not alive, unchanged. You weren't naive enough to bargain with God for survival. You knew better. What you wanted was for him not to come back a stranger. Now you realize that was too much to ask. Behind you, the wind hums through the chapel's narrow windows, thin and cold and almost melodic. You used to find comfort in that sound, in the idea that the wind might carry your thoughts beyond the walls. Now it just sounds like the sighing of a house too old to keep secrets anymore. You sit longer than you intend to. The candle shortens. Your knees ache, but you stay. Because what else do you have? The chapel is the only place where time doesn't chase you. Out there, the steward watches you like a ledger. The servants whisper in thresholds. The falcon refuses to fly. But in here, no one expects anything, not even God. The statue's hands are open, as always, offering what forgiveness, shelter, pity. You reach out and rest your fingers on her foot, tracing the chipped marble where her toes once curled in perfect sculpted grace. One has broken off. Years ago. No one fixed it. You find that strangely comforting. Even saints decay. Even symbols fall apart. Historians still argue whether these statues were meant to inspire awe or simply obedience. You think neither. You think they were built to reflect the women kneeling before them, strong-faced, silent, half-broken. You rise slowly, joints complaining. The candle is nearly out now. You leave it burning, a gesture more than a prayer, and retreat to the corner alcove where the little stone seat nestles between pillars. You've spent hours here over the years, hidden from sight but not sound. Once, you overheard two young squires debating whether ghosts haunt battlefields or bedrooms. One said they haunt the place they died. The other said they haunt the person they love most. You haven't stopped thinking about that since. You sit there now, wondering which answer you prefer. You wonder if your husband is already a ghost, and if so, whether he's here with you, watching you fumble with faith and memory, or maybe he's elsewhere beside a stream, near a broken sword, whispering apologies into leaves no one will ever pick up. The door creaks suddenly, and your heart stumbles, but it's only the wind again, pressing gently against the frame before letting go. You pull your shawl tighter, not against cold, but against vulnerability. In this castle, shawls are armor, rings are shields. Silence is a weapon. You've mastered all three. You wonder if the Virgin notices, or if she too is tired of pretending to be soft. You think back to your childhood, before you were sent here, the little chapel in your mother's garden, the bees humming near the windows, the smell of rosemary braided into your hair. You used to think that prayers worked if you whispered them with your eyes closed. Now you know better. Now you understand that prayers don't work. They just echo. They bounce around the chambers of your chest until they fade into thoughts that feel like decisions. You stop praying and start planning. It's what women do when the waiting gets too loud. You rise again and make your way toward the altar. The floor creaks beneath you, the old stone speaking in groans and murmurs. You place one hand on the cloth-draped table, feeling the rough linen beneath your palm. There's a small book resting there, open to the Psalms. You skim the lines, not reading them so much as absorbing their weight. I am poured out like water. My bones are out of joint. You close the book gently. Even scripture sounds tired tonight. You turn to leave and pause at the threshold. There's a small mock wooden carving on the doorframe, faint, nearly worn smooth by time. It's the mark your husband made when you were first wed. A crescent, a line, and a dot, your initials, in his secret shorthand. He said it was your private sigil, something to bless the room with your presence. You touch it now, fingertips tracing the memory like a scar. It's still there. You're still here, somehow. That feels like defiance. Back in your chamber, you light another candle, not because it's dark, because it's ritual, because lighting things feels like summoning control. You place it beside the belt and the dagger. You stare at the little arrangement, and it almost looks like a shrine, but not to him. To absence, to survival, to you. You pick up the dagger again, weigh it in your palm. Its balance is perfect. He always admired it for that, said it reminded him of you. Beautiful, but not to be underestimated. You remember blushing when he said that. You were 19. You hadn't learned yet that words are easier than returns. You set the dagger down and unlatched the small box beneath the desk. Inside are letters, some real, some forged. You know which are which. You read them anyway. Tonight you choose the fourth one, the one that begins with, "My heart. If the stars are dimmer tonight, it is because I took their light with me." A line so unlike him, so plainly false, but still, you read it. Because sometimes lies soothe better than silence. You close the box without finishing the letter. You've memorized them all. The endings are always the same. You blow out the candle. The room softens into darkness. The stone beneath your feet hums with storm memory. You lie back on the bed, fully clothed, head turned toward the wall. You press your fingers together, as if in prayer, but say nothing. You've given the Virgin enough for one night. You close your eyes and listen not for hoofbeats, not for messengers, but for the sound of your own breath. It's still there. You're still here. That's what matters now. The falcon circles once above the rampart before spiraling down to the stone perch with a confused rattle of feathers. You're already waiting by the aviary, one hand resting on the low wall, the other clutching the glove he left behind. It's worn now, soft with age. The leather nearly polished from your fingers rubbing over the seam where his initials were once embossed. The bird lands awkwardly, as if unsure of the ritual. You offer your arm anyway, and it hops onto your wrist. Weight heavier than you remembered. Its talons grip the glove, not cruelly, but firmly just enough to remind you that trust between beasts is never assumed, only earned again and again. You stare at the bird's eyes, sharp and impatient, the same way his used to glance toward the horizon before he spoke of departure. You whisper, "He trained you better than this," and the falcon tilts its head like it remembers, or like it doesn't care. You both wait in different ways. He loved that bird more than he admitted, said it understood silence better than men. He used to spend hours with it perched beside him, grooming its wings with slow, thoughtful fingers, as if each feather carried a prayer. You remember watching him from the tower window, thinking he looked most himself when he wasn't trying to be anyone else. The falcon always returned to him, no matter how far it flew. Always. Until the day he didn't whistle. Since then, it's been different. It flies for you now, but returns with hesitation, often landing on the high wall first, looking around, as if searching for the hand it was promised. It brings back scraps, bone, fur, bits of rabbit no one asked for. You take them with solemnity, pretend they're offerings from another world. Messages carried not by words, but by wing. Today, it drops nothing, just lands, perches, and waits. You feed it raw meat from the tin in your apron, and it tears at the flesh with a kind of hunger that feels performative, like it knows you're watching, like it's performing grief. You know the feeling. You've been doing it for months. The stable boys whisper that the falcon is mourning, that it's disoriented by loss. But falcons don't mourn. They adapt. It's people who pretend animals feel what they cannot articulate themselves. Historians still argue whether birds were symbols or soldiers in noble courts, trained messengers of loyalty or just another decorative possession. You suspect the answer lies somewhere in the bird's eyes, unblinking, ancient, deeply indifferent. You carry it back to the rookery. The other birds rustle in their cages, feathers puffing and settling as you pass. You place your falcon gently back on its perch, secure the leather jest to the peg, and whisper, "You don't have to wait anymore." But it doesn't blink, doesn't move, just stares out the window toward the gray, horizonless sky, as though one more glance might reverse time. You exit the tower and descend the stairs slowly. Each step echoes against the narrow walls, a rhythm you've come to count like a prayer, 12 steps to the bottom, 12 beats before your thoughts start speaking again. You step into the courtyard where the trees have begun to shed leaves like faded coins scattering across the stones. You pause, watching a few swirl in a sudden gust, then settle again like exhausted dancers. The castle feels quiet today, not peaceful, just tired. The servants speak in softer tones. Even the dogs curl more tightly beneath the benches, sensing some mood that hasn't yet been named aloud. The steward approaches you with a stiff nod. The priest is asking, he says. You raise an eyebrow. Asking for what? If you'll return to mass. He's concerned. You almost laugh, but instead, you say, "Tell him I'm in mourning." The steward hesitates. He says that's precisely why you should come. You turn away from him before replying. Grief doesn't kneel where he wants it to, and you leave it at that. Let him report your heresy. If he dares, let them wonder what kind of woman refuses comfort in public. They don't know that comfort, once witnessed, turns into theater, and you're no actress, not anymore. You find yourself in the solar again, drawn to the same window, the same seat, the same pattern of light across the floor that looks like a cross when the sun is low. You sit and run your fingers over the armrest, feeling for the grooves you once carved there in secret. 3 shallow lines, one for each week after he left. You stopped carving when the pain dulled. You didn't want to confuse forgetting with healing. A knock at the door. You don't answer. It opens anyway. The priest enters, robes fluttering like he thinks they grant him authority. He doesn't bow. You notice, my lady, he says, stepping inside. I worry for your soul. You smile without warmth. How generous. Your isolation. It gives the wrong impression. To whom? To the people. To the court. To God. You stand slowly, voice quiet but unyielding. God has not sent word, nor has your husband. He replies before he thinks, and then silence, the kind that freezes blood. Forgive me, he stammers. That was unkind. You step closer. It was accurate. He nods once, unsure whether he's been defeated or invited to speak again. You let him fumble for a while, then say, you may return to your chapel. Father, I'll grieve in mine. He wants to argue. You see it in his jaw, but he doesn't. He bows and retreats. You sit back down. The light has shifted now. The cross on the floor is gone. Just sunlight and dust and your own breathing. You close your eyes and picture the falcon again. Its wings spread like a judgment it never delivers. You envy it. It can fly. You cannot. All you can do is wait and remember, and sometimes forget just long enough to breathe without guilt. In the distance, bells chime, not for a wedding, not for a birth, just time passing, the hour announcing itself like a bored guest. You rise and walk to the window. You see the tower, the rookery, the small form of the falcon, unmoving, and for one mad moment, you consider unlocking its jess, opening the shutters, letting it go. Let it vanish into the sky and never return. Let it find something you never will, but you don't. You step back, because release is not your ritual. You were taught to endure, not escape. Evening seeps in slowly, like ink in water. You descend to the kitchen, not because you're hungry, but because the hearth there still breathes. You sit in the corner where he once sat after hunts, a spot half forgotten by the staff. They bring you broth, unsure whether to speak. You nod your thanks and sip, letting the salt sit on your tongue. It tastes like tears, not your own, someone else's. Perhaps the girl scrubbing the floor, perhaps the falcon, perhaps the wind. You return to your room late. The belt is still where you left it. The dagger gleams faintly. You light a single candle and sit beside them. You speak aloud for the first time in days. She flew today, you say. You don't say her name. You never name the bird. That was his job. You just trained her to come back. But she doesn't land the same way now. She doesn't look at you like she did him. And you wonder, not for the first time, if any living thing ever truly returns once love has left the room. Winter doesn't knock when it comes to a castle. It seeps. It creeps. It claims. One morning you wake, and your breath becomes visible. You light the fire, but the warmth never quite reaches your hands. The tapestries stiffen like cold skins nailed to the wall. The floor beneath your feet grows harder, more indifferent. You dress in layers now, wool over linen, silk beneath the velvet. But it all feels like armor against an enemy who doesn't care about titles or grief. The wind moves through the halls like it owns them. Doors moan, latches rattle. Even the dogs whimper in their sleep. And yet, no one says the word winter, as if naming it would invite its full cruelty. You move slower these days, not from age, but to conserve warmth as if stillness might preserve you. The servants have taken to wearing gloves indoors. You haven't. You want to feel everything, even the cold, especially the cold, because the cold is honest. It doesn't pretend to be kind. You sit in the library now more often, the one chamber where sunlight still pretends to visit, though its warmth has long since vanished. Dust curls through the golden shafts of light like forgotten thoughts. You unroll the old battle maps he once studied, creases deep, edges torn, little dots and symbols he scribbled with such certainty. He believed war was like chess, that men could be moved with logic. You trace the lines with your fingertip, not for strategy, but for closeness. You remember him leaning over these same maps, whispering to himself, laughing sometimes, not because war was funny, but because he loved the game of it. You never said it aloud, but you hated that part of him, the part that found beauty in conquest. You wanted to love a man who'd choose peace. Instead, you loved a man who left. One scrap of parchment stands out a torn piece, barely larger than your palm, tucked between 2 pages of a psalter. It's not labeled, just marked with a small X in the margin. A river crossing, you remember the name. It was mentioned in the writer's story, ambush, mud, blood, and then silence. You hold the paper to the light. A faint brown stain colors the corner. Not ink. You wonder if it's his. You wonder how many lives end without certainty. How many women are left holding relics like this, unsure if they mean mourning or mistaken identity. Historians still argue whether men were buried near where they fell or hauled back under the cover of night for the sake of dignity. You suspect most were left where they dropped, buried by snow, not ceremony. You fold the paper carefully and return it to the psalter. You place the book back on the shelf. You whisper, "He never read you," and then turn away. The library closes around you like a sigh. Books don't talk. That's their mercy. You pass through the corridor where the stained glass windows throw colored light onto the stone. Blue and red and gold, dancing quietly over your face like forgotten celebration. One panel is cracked. The Virgin again, always the Virgin, her hand raised in frozen blessing. You used to believe her. Now, not so much. She's seen too many women beg for sons to return and has never once blinked. In the solar, your embroidery frame still waits. You haven't touched it in days, weeks. The threads hang loose, limp, half-stitched into vines that no longer know what they're climbing toward. You sit beside it, but not to work, just to watch the light move across the fabric. You think of the times he sat beside you here, pretending interest, asking what the pattern meant. You never told him. The patterns didn't mean anything. They were just something to do while waiting. He said once that your patience was frightening. You said, "Then don't make me use it." He laughed, and still, he left. The falcon no longer flies. She perches near the rookery window and stares. You brought her a rabbit yesterday. She didn't eat it, just turned her head to the side like she was listening to something you couldn't hear. You know what that means. She's giving up. You should release her. But then what? Let her starve over woods that don't remember who she is. You sigh and close your eyes, picturing her wings extended, casting shadows like warning flags. Maybe she understands grief after all, or maybe she's just cold. At night, the wind howls down the chimney, and you pull the furs tighter. Your hands no longer warm each other. Your feet remain blocks of ice beneath the covers. You used to sleep on the left side. Now you sprawl diagonally, chasing warmth across the mattress. His pillow is gone, removed one morning by a maid who thought she was being helpful. You said nothing. You only folded the sheet over twice and stared at the empty space like it had betrayed you. Sometimes you still wake and reach for him, out of instinct, not belief. You write a letter the next morning, not to him, to no one. You don't sign it. You just write a name at the top and then spill a page of nothing memories, colors, the way his voice dipped when he was tired. You fold it and place it in the drawer with the others, a drawer full of unsent confessions. If anyone finds them after you die, they'll assume they were love letters. They won't be wrong. They just won't know who you wrote them for. It wasn't him. It was the version of you that existed when he was still here. You miss her more than you miss him. The steward knocks at your chamber door that afternoon. His face is pale, hands wringing his cap like a child. "The bridge is gone," he says. "Flood took it." You stare at him. "Which bridge?" "The east one. The only one we use in winter." You nod. "So, we're cut off for now." You close the door. You feel nothing. No fear, no frustration, just stillness. The same way you felt when they told you the plague had reached the village. The same way you felt when you found the dagger beside your bed. Isolation is no longer a punishment. It's a routine. You light the chapel candles yourself that evening, one by one. You whisper names as you do it, not saints, not martyrs, servants, horses, women you knew in girlhood, people who vanished without echo. You light one extra, no name, just a flame. It flickers violently for a moment, then steadies. You sit and watch it until your eyes sting. The chapel is cold, but you stay. You always stay. When you return to your chamber, you notice something different. The sash is missing. You search the bed, the chest, the floor, nothing. You ring for the maid. Did you move something from my bed? She shakes her head, frightened. You dismiss her. You find it the next day, tucked behind the dresser, half covered in dust. You don't remember placing it there. You don't remember forgetting it. You sit on the floor and hold it, and for the first time in weeks, you let yourself cry. Not because of the sash, because of what forgetting means. You fall asleep that night with the sash in your hands, curled into yourself like a relic in a tomb. Winter tightens its grip on the castle, but you no longer fight it. You close your eyes and let it have you. Dreams return to you in the solar that week, not the bright, hopeful dreams of a young bride, but heavy ones, dreams with no clear edges, no beginning or end, only the haunting sensation of breath on your neck and a presence that cannot decide whether to comfort or condemn. You doze there often now, curled beside the window, wrapped in a woolen shawl that smells faintly of smoke and time. You sleep not because you are tired, but because waking holds no better promise, and the dreams are strange, repetitive, looping, always. You see his back walking away down the long castle corridor, not toward war this time, but deeper into the stone itself. He never turns around. You call to him once in the dream, only once, and even that feels like a betrayal, because if he turns, if he sees you, it might mean he never left. And if he never left, then what has all this silence been for? One morning, you wake from a different dream. In this one, he's sitting in the library, smiling at you. His eyes are soft, familiar, not yet hardened by distance. He says your name, just your name, nothing more. You wake with tears drying on your cheeks and a dull ache in your hands, as if you've been holding something too tightly in your sleep. The room is bright with frost-reflected sun, your breath still visible, the fire a dying whisper in the grate. You sit up slowly and say your name aloud to the empty room, just to hear it spoken. It feels brittle, like a shard of something once whole. Historians still argue whether women like you clung to dreams because they were delusional, or because no one gave them truth to hold instead. You lean toward the second. What else are you meant to keep company with when no one will say the word widow aloud? You rise and move to the window. Below, in the courtyard, two boys chase each other with sticks, laughing like they've never heard the word war. You envy them, not for their freedom, but for their forgetfulness, for their complete inability to imagine death as something that wears their father's armor. You glance toward the tower where the falcon perches. She hasn't flown in days. Her feathers have dulled. Her eyes seem to watch nothing. You wonder if she knows. Not that he's gone, but that he's gone from you. You tap your fingers against the sill. Nothing stirs. The wind is still. Later, you open the chest beneath your bed and pull out the tunic. His old one, worn thin at the collar. You had the servants wash it months ago, hoping to preserve the shape. It smells of dust now. No pine, no leather. You hold it close anyway. You lie down with it across your chest, your arms resting along the folded sleeves, as if he were there smaller, quieter, flatter. A relic of breath. You do not cry. You simply lie there and try to match your pulse to the silence. By midday, you drift again, not into sleep, but into that strange liminal stillness where the world becomes transparent. The sun has reached its zenith, but the light feels like dusk. The castle is quieter than usual, no kitchen clatter, no distant commands, just wind at the windows and the occasional creak of timber. It feels like the world is holding its breath. You walk the corridors like a shadow, hands trailing along the stone as though it might remember your name if you touch it gently enough. You stop outside the locked chamber, the one he used for writing, for studying, for escaping from the weight of command. No one has entered it since he left. The key is in your hand before you realize you've retrieved it. The door groans open, dust rises, lazy and accusatory. The room smells of ink, old wax, parchment left too long beside forgotten flame. His chair still sits before the desk, half pushed back, as if he'd stood suddenly and meant to return. You do not sit. You walk slowly to the desk and run your hand across its surface. There, beside the inkwell, lies a small folded note, unsealed, addressed to no one. You hesitate, then unfold it. It reads only, "If I do not return, it was never because I stopped loving you. It was because I forgot how to be anything but gone." You stand there for a long time, not breathing, not weeping, just standing. The ink is old, faint, but unmistakably his hand, his words. It's not comfort, it's not closure, it's not even enough to fill the hollow space inside your chest, but it's something. And something is more than you expected to find behind this door. Historians still argue whether love letters were written before battle or after betrayal. You believe this was written in between, in that strange crack where dread becomes honesty. You sit down, finally. You place the note flat on the desk, smoothing the edges. You do not press it to your lips. You are beyond gestures now. You read it again and again, until the words begin to blur, not from tears, but from repetition. When you leave the room, you lock it behind you, but you keep the note, folded, hidden inside your sleeve. The next morning, you wake before dawn. The fire is already cold. You light it yourself, fingers trembling slightly as you strike the flint. The spark is stubborn today, resisting your insistence. When the flame finally catches, you don't feed it. You just sit and watch it flicker on its own, the weak light casting slow, long shadows across the stone. The castle feels different now, not heavier, not lighter, just changed, as though something has exhaled. You walk to the chapel, not for prayer, for rhythm. The walk steadies you. You pass the Virgin, you pass the candlestand, you pass the pews, and you enter the alcove behind the altar, where the oldest relics are kept. There, in the dust and dim, you place the note, not as an offering, not as a confession, just a record that someone once said something true. Even if no one reads it, even if it fades, you place it beside the shard of broken icon, the piece you once tucked away, the past and the present, side by side. You light a candle, not for him, but for the girl you were when you believed he would come home. That evening, the falcon flies, not far, not high, not fast, but she rises. She circles once over the tower, wings slicing through the air with quiet defiance. You watch her from the window, arms folded. You don't smile, you don't whisper, you just watch. When she lands, she doesn't come to you. She lands on the wall, alone, distant, but there. And you feel it, an unspoken understanding between two creatures who have waited too long for someone who will not return. You nod once, she blinks, and the wind carries the moment away before it can settle. That night, you sleep through until morning. No dreams, just breath, just warmth, just rest. When you wake, the sun has returned, and the room doesn't feel quite so empty. Your father's letter arrives wrapped in thick parchment, sealed with a broken crest that once meant power, but now means obligation. The writer who delivers it waits awkwardly in the courtyard, refusing wine, speaking in clipped tones. He hands it off like something diseased, then mounts his horse before you've even cracked the wax. You stand in the solar with the letter unopened, hands unmoving, eyes already knowing. It's heavier than paper should be. You run your thumb over the seal, not your family's usual crimson, but a pale wax, cracked at the center like a wound. You consider throwing it in the fire, but fires are greedy, and some things deserve to rot slowly. So, you open it. The ink is bold. The penmanship too neat to be your father's own. One of his scribes, no doubt. But the words are unmistakably his. Measured, stern, exhausted. He does not ask if you are well. He does not mention your name until the second paragraph. He speaks of lineage, of legacy, of the dangers of letting land lie in widows' hands, of alliances, of the way a daughter must think of more than mourning. Then, finally, a sentence so cleanly written it nearly erases your breath. It would be wise to consider remarriage before the year turns. Just like that. Not a question, not a request, a mandate cloaked in civility. He includes 2 names, both men you've met, both dull as salted bread, one older than your father, one younger than your cousin's youngest son, neither worthy of the soil your husband bled into. You fold the letter carefully and place it in the drawer beside the forged ones, where it can be silenced. The next day, the steward asks gently, almost kindly, if you've had a chance to consider your father's proposal. You look at him for a long time, letting the air thicken between you. Did you read it? You ask. He stiffens. No, my lady. You believe him. He wouldn't dare. Then don't ask me what it says. He bows and withdraws. You turn back to the fire, where a pot of wine simmers. You drink it warm now, not for flavor, but to thaw something inside that keeps freezing over. Word spreads anyway. It always does. The servants begin treating you with a new kind of caution. As though you've grown a second face they're afraid to look directly at. The cook offers extra pastries at supper. The stable boy stops whistling when you pass. The chaplain begins hinting, in sermons and in silences, that the future is not built by ghosts. You ignore them all. You walk the battlements each evening, cloak billowing like rumor, and think of the 2 names in your father's letter. You picture each man sitting in your hall. You picture them reaching for your hand, your threshold, your lands. You picture them trying to wear your husband's chair like it fits. It doesn't. It never will. That week, you find yourself in the West Tower, a place you rarely visit. The steps are narrower there, the view more obscured, but it's quiet. Dusk gathers in corners untouched. You bring a candle and sit by the narrow window, knees drawn to your chest like a girl. You read an old ledger you find in the corner grain tallies, tenant disputes, weather notes from a winter 10 years past. Your husband's notes, scribbled in margins, make you smile. Rain again. The cellar leaks. Who let the chickens into the library? You remember that day. The squires never confessed. The books still smell faintly of straw. You close the ledger and hold it to your chest. You think of telling your father, I already belong to someone. He's just inconveniently dead. Later, you send a reply. You keep it short. No decision can be made while the frost still holds. I will write again when the earth softens. You don't sign it with affection. You don't sign it at all. Let them guess your mood. Let them chew on your silence like old bones. The falcon resumes her flights, at first cautious, low arcs over the training yard, then higher, bolder. She never flies far, but it feels like rebellion. You watch her from the tower window and feel something stir in your chest. Pride, maybe, or longing, or a kind of vicarious freedom. You think, if she can fly again, so can I. Not literally, of course. Your wings were clipped the day you were born. But you can shift. You can unroot. You can do what no one expects. So you make a list. In your head, quietly. What you'll keep, what you'll burn, what rooms to seal, what rooms to open again. You consider the storeroom beneath the chapel, the one no one visits. You haven't stepped foot there in years. Not since the stillbirth of your cousin's daughter was hidden among its cobwebs. But you unlock it now. You sweep the dust, you sort through the broken crates, and there, tucked beneath a moth-eaten tapestry, you find your old saddle, the one he bought you during your first year of marriage, before war became his calling and solitude became yours. You brush it clean. You run your hand over the leather. You imagine riding again. You send for the stable master. Ask if the mare your mare is still fit. He hesitates. She's restless, he says. She hasn't been ridden in months. You nod. Neither have I. He blinks, then bows. She'll be ready. And so, One morning, before the castle fully wakes, you mount, alone. No attendants, no guards, no priest muttering protections into your saddlecloth. You ride, not far, just enough to remember the feeling. The wind bites, the sky holds no warmth, but your body remembers the rhythm, the weight, the balance. You feel it in your thighs, your spine, your hands. You ride to the edge of the woods and back, and no one sees you. That's the best part. It's yours, completely. Back at the stable, you dismount and rub the mare's neck. She snorts, as if amused. You whisper, "We may do this again." And you mean it. That night, you write in your journal for the first time since his death. You begin with a line you don't expect he would have hated this silence. And then you keep writing. Pages of it. Your own words. Not addressed to him or your father or the Virgin. Just to yourself. You write about your hair, your dreams, the way the castle creaks when no one's listening. You write about the man your father wants you to marry, and how you might poison him if he breathes too loudly at dinner. You write about the falcon, and the saddle, and the map you're starting to redraw in your mind. You sleep well that night, not peacefully, but solidly, as if your body believes it has somewhere to go. The music reaches you before the bard does a slow, minor key melody, winding through the corridor like something lost in time. You pause on the stairs, hand resting against the carved banister, the sound so familiar it steals your breath. You know the tune. Every noblewoman in the kingdom knows that tune. It's a wedding song. Yours. Not just any version, but your version, the one rewritten for your betrothal feast. The one sung in the great hall while you blushed behind your veil, hand folded tightly in his as your father nodded his approval. It was a hopeful song then. Too hopeful. Now, in the echo of a stranger's voice, it sounds like morning in disguise. You descend the stairs slowly, as if each note tugs at your ankles. When you enter the hall, you see him, the bard, sitting cross-legged near the hearth, his lute weathered, his face too young to know the history he's just awoken. He doesn't look at you. He just plays. The servants keep working, their movements subdued, like they, too, remember what this song once meant. You sit at the far end of the table, spine straight, eyes fixed on the fire, pretending not to listen, but the chords wrap around your ribs anyway, pulling tight with every verse. When he reaches the line that once made your husband squeeze your hand, and the stars bowed low for the night, and his flame, you feel your throat tighten. Not from grief, from rage, because it's not the same. The melody is wrong, the tempo too slow, the ending unresolved. It's like the song forgot how to be itself, or worse, like it's been twisted on purpose, reborn into a dirge. When the bard finishes, there's polite applause. You say nothing. He stands and bows. His eyes finally find yours, but you do not look away. Instead, you raise your hand, and the hall falls quiet. Where did you learn that you ask, voice even? From another court, he says, unsure now. It's an old song, my lady. I thought it might please. You nod, slowly. It's my song. His mouth parts, surprise blooming. I didn't know. No, you didn't. You stand and walk past him. You don't explain. You don't scold. You just leave him to feel the weight of it, the ghost he summoned without permission. That night, the tune haunts the halls. You hear it even when it's not playing. It echoes in the spiral staircase, in the rustle of your gown, in the hush between candle flickers. You hum it once, unintentionally, and it sounds wrong even from your own mouth. You pour wine and sit alone in the solar, tracing the edge of your goblet as if it might steady you. The fire burns low. You imagine him standing behind you, as he did during that song, hands at your waist, whispering that you looked like a queen. You didn't feel like one then. You feel more like one now, alone, watching others try to interpret your joy and get it wrong. You retrieve the sheet music from the library. You still have it handwritten by the old composer who retired after your wedding. It's yellowed now, ink faded. You stare at the notes, trying to remember how it felt to hear them the first time. The page smells of dust and lavender. You place it on the music stand in the corner, untouched for years, and pluck the melody on the old psaltery with fingers that remember more than your heart does. Slowly, painfully, the tune comes back. Not the bard's version, yours, the one that meant beginnings. You stop halfway through, you can't finish. Some endings are no longer yours to play. The next morning, the bard requests an audience. You agree, but only in the chapel. You want the Virgin watching. You want the saints to listen. He bows deeply, his hat twisted in nervous hands. I meant no offense. He begins. I only wish to honor your house, then learn the difference. You reply, between honoring and echoing what isn't yours. He nods. If you tell me how it was truly played, I'll learn it. I'll play it right. You study him. He's earnest. That makes it worse. You step closer. No one plays it now. Let it rest. He bows again and leaves. You don't watch him go. That evening, you sit with the falcon again. She's restless, hopping from perch to perch, wings twitching. You open the shutter beside her and let the cold in. She doesn't fly. She watches the open sky and waits, like you. She's too smart to leap blindly, too old to soar for nothing. You murmur, if you go, don't return. But she stays. You find the servants humming the wrong version later that week. In the kitchen, over bread and honey. They don't know you're listening. You don't interrupt. Let them have it. It belongs to no one now. Like so many other things you once held dear. Like his riding cloak, now cut and stitched into a stable boy's new coat. Like the embroidered sleeve you once wore at court, now lining a prayer cushion. Grief in a castle is not just mourning. It's the slow disassembly of your life into usefulness. Your memories turn to thread. You stop wearing the color blue. It was his favorite. Instead, you wear charcoal, deep red, ochre. Colors that mean nothing. Colors that don't speak. When the steward asks if you wish to host a winter feast, you say no. He hesitates. It might lift morale. Let them lift their own. The people need joy. He insists. So do I. You reply and walk away. The bard leaves. You do not say goodbye. He leaves behind a small gift, a carved wooden box with a music cylinder inside. When wound, it plays a version of the song, not your version. His. Slower, sadder. You place it in the drawer with the rest, the dagger, the letters, the belt, the mask of a life once whole. You close the drawer and do not open it again that week. Instead, you spend more time outside, walking the garden paths that curl through skeletal hedges and dead herbs. You whisper names to the trees, names of women who waited too long. You think of your mother, who never remarried, of your aunt, who remarried twice and died before 40. You think of the girl you were the day the song was first played, nervous, radiant, oblivious. You think of the woman you are now, quieter, colder, sharper. Historians still argue whether noble women had power or merely proximity to it, but none of them write about what happens after the last soldier dies and the world stops singing. No one writes about how a woman becomes a monument, silent, respected, entirely misunderstood. You smile at the thought. You are no monument. You are the echo that lives in the stone. You are the song they keep getting wrong. That night, as the fire dies and the wind rises, you hum something else, not your song, a different one you haven't heard before, one with no words, no memory, just melody, soft, defiant, entirely yours. You wake in the quiet, heart beating to a rhythm that doesn't belong to the castle. Something has shifted. You know it before your feet touch the stone floor, before the embers in the hearth hiss softly as the wind snakes through the shutter cracks. You place a hand on your belly, a habit, not a question, but this time the sensation lingers, a weight, not of sleep, not of sadness, something deeper, cellular, ancient. Your hand stays there, still. You rise slowly, unsure why your breath is suddenly shallow. The mirror shows no difference, yet you stare at your reflection longer than usual, as if searching for someone else's face behind your own. You brush your hair, You dress. You fasten your bodice slower, each movement deliberate, ritualized. You tell no one. Not yet. Not even yourself. That day, you walk more than usual, around the perimeter wall, down to the stables, through the empty chapel. Your feet guide you with purpose you don't understand. When the cook offers broth, you take it. When the steward asks about the ledgers, you nod and wave him away. Your body is not yours, not entirely. You sit in the solar, stare out the frost-kissed glass, and try to listen inward. The thought has begun to form in your mind, but it has not yet shaped itself into language. And so, instead of thinking, you watch the falcon. She flies again. Short arcs, controlled dives. She returns now without hesitation, each landing a declaration. The days pass, and your suspicion grows quietly. Your fingers tremble more often when you tie your sash. Your appetite shifts, not wildly, just enough to notice. You sleep curled around your own uncertainty, and in the mornings you stand at the window and count the breaths it takes to steady yourself. 1, 2, 3, 4. You remember the last time you counted like this, it was when you watched the procession of his departure, spears catching sunlight like knives, his figure slowly shrinking into the horizon. You counted to 58 before the mist swallowed him whole. Then, one evening, alone in the bath, you feel it. The faintest movement like a ripple from within, as though someone gently pressed a finger against the inside of your skin. You stop breathing. You sit there, water cooling around you, arms frozen on the rim of the basin, and you wait. You press your palm flat over your stomach and whisper, "Is that you?" But there is no answer, only the echo of water settling and your own heartbeat crashing through your ears. You climb out, wrap yourself in the robe, and do not tell anyone, not even the maid who brushes your hair that night, and comments that your face looks softer, that your eyes seem changed. The truth blooms slowly, like a bruise. It's undeniable now. You feel it in your bones. You are carrying something, life, or the memory of it. You don't know when. You don't know how. You do the math in your head, over and over, subtracting weeks from months, measuring silence in cycles. And then comes the deeper question, the one you do not speak, even to yourself. Could it be his? Or did the night take more than just your hall's warmth when he passed through with his false sympathy and unreadable eyes? You clutch the memory of that visit like a blade. You don't remember letting him near you. But absence does strange things to the mind, and grief is a door left ajar. Historians still argue whether noblewomen truly had control over their bodies, or whether their legacies were just the consequence of proximity and timing. You're not interested in their arguments. You're interested in your body's betrayal or its miracle. You sit with both words in your mouth and let them dissolve. You tell no one, but the castle seems to know. The cook starts slipping more food onto your tray. The washerwoman stops scrubbing so loudly. Even the steward's footsteps soften, as if everyone feels a tremor beneath the floor and chooses to pretend it's nothing. One night, unable to sleep, you open the drawer beside your bed and unfold the old letters, one by one. The real, the forged, the ones you never sent. You place them side by side on the bed and trace your fingers over the script. Then you speak, softly. If this is yours, I will raise it in your name. If it is not, I will raise it in mine. The candle flickers in response. You take that as agreement. You begin to change your habits. You stop climbing the tower stairs so often. You stay near the gardens, where the air is kinder, the ground more forgiving. You walk slower. You listen to your breath. You speak more to the falcon, who now perches near your window, as if guarding something unseen. You hum to her, not your wedding song, a new one, a lullaby you invent, note by note, wordless but warm. She tilts her head when you sing. She seems to understand. By the second month, your body no longer lets you pretend. The seamstress adjusts your gowns without asking why. The maid draws your bathwater with the herbs to ease your sleep. Still, no one speaks of it. Not until the priest arrives at your solar one morning with a tray of spiced wine and a cautious smile. He bows too low, then says, "There are rumors. My lady. You look at him, calm. There always are. He hesitates. Would you like to confess to what to hope? You laugh. It's quiet, sharp, surprising. Father, you say, I don't know what this is yet. Hope or inheritance. He studies you, then bows again and retreats. He leaves the wine. You don't touch it. That afternoon, you sit by the fire with your hand resting on your stomach, and for the first time, you say it aloud. Child, just once, just to see how it feels in your mouth. It doesn't feel wrong. It doesn't feel right. It feels unfinished. You spend more time in your husband's study. You read the ledgers, the scrolls. You find his old war reports, folded with precision, stained with ink and mud. You find one that mentions a lull in fighting, dated around the time he last wrote to you. The timing works. It might be his. It could be. You allow yourself the thought for a full day. You dress in blue again, just once. You stand in the mirror and wonder what he'd think. You imagine him placing a hand on your belly, smiling, saying something foolish about suns and swords. And then you imagine him saying nothing at all, just looking, the way he used to when he thought you weren't watching. That you remember most clearly. Then the thought returns the night. His eyes, his confidence, his hunger. You remember how close he stood, the way his voice softened when he said your name. You remember nothing else, and that remembering is what terrifies you, because there is room for doubt now, and in that space, 1,000 questions bloom like thorns. You don't decide. You don't need to. The child will grow. Time will answer what your mind cannot, but you make one promise to yourself in that moment. Sitting there in the library, your hand resting on your belly, the candlelight stretching long across the stone. This child will belong to no one who tried to inherit you. If it's his, you will raise it in silence, with songs and history and softness where once there was only endurance. If it's not, you will raise it anyway, with truth, with strength, with the certainty that it came into a world built by waiting and born of survival, and for the first time in many months, you smile. Not for anyone else, just for you. Even the priest stops using your husband's name. It happens subtly at first, an omission in a homily, a skipped line in the chapel roll. Then, in confession, he speaks of your late husband without waiting for your correction. You do not give it. The title sits heavily in the air, unanswered. It echoes not in outrage, but in quiet acknowledgement of what everyone has already decided. You say nothing. You watch it pass like a procession from a distance, a name once heavy with command, now dissolving into soft irrelevance. The servants follow suit. They refer to the Lord less often. They ask about repairs, storage, the coming spring, not with deference to his opinion, but to your authority. Even the steward, once rigid with hierarchy, now asks, would you like it done this way instead of, is that how he would have preferred it? And this shift, though slow, slices deeper than grief, because now you are the only one keeping his name alive, and even you are growing tired of the sound of it. You visit the chapel more now, not for prayer, but for memory. You sit in the last pew and watch the flame dance above the altar, a nervous thing that flickers each time the door groans open. You think about the last time his name was spoken in ritual, the mass said after the message came, when you weren't yet sure if the dagger in the belt were lies or proof. You remember the priest intoning, "May the Lord receive the soul of Sir Aldrich," and how the sound of it made the space feel too small, as if there was no room for both his name and your silence. Now, the name is gone, omitted, like a stain quietly scrubbed from a wall, and you feel the absence of it in strange places, on your tongue when you wake, in the space where your signature used to include his crest, in the letters from your father that no longer mention your loss, but instead lean into phrases like your estate, your decisions, your household. You have become singular again, and it terrifies you, because you spent so long being plural, being his, being someone's wife, someone's grief, someone's waiting, and now you are simply you, and no one knows what to do with that, least of all, you. The household adjusts. It always does. The falconer stops mentioning the hunts your husband once favored. The tapestries in the hall begin to fade from sun exposure, and no one replaces them. A corner of the great hall is cleared for storage, and with it, the last remnants of his war table are moved, folded, dusted, forgotten. One morning, the steward asks if you'd like to move the weapons to the lower hall for preservation. He says, "You nod. Do as you see fit." He bows, surprised by your ease. But it's not ease. It's exhaustion. You keep one thing, a small chest of his letters, the real ones, and the wax seal with his sigil, the raven's wing wrapped around the sun. You do not use it, you simply keep it. Not for remembrance, but as a sort of tether, a reminder that once you were tethered, that once you belonged, not in ownership, but in gravity. The midwife arrives 1 week later, unannounced, sent by your father, though the letter explaining so arrives 2 days after her. She's older than you expect, with hands that look like they've stitched more than they've held. She bows low when she sees you, then straightens with a look that suggests she bows for no one's comfort but her own. She says nothing about your state. She simply begins preparing. Herbs, cloth, dried roots laid out in neat bundles. The maid helps her, whispering nervously. You watch them from the doorway and think, so this is what it means to be seen. Not as a lady, not as a widow, but as a vessel. Something that will open, something that might break. That night, you ask the midwife directly, "How long do I have?" She does not pretend to misunderstand. Until summer's end. She says, "Maybe a little more, maybe less." You nod. You want to ask, "Whose is it?" but you don't. Because the question no longer matters. You have made your decision, and the child will be yours, no matter what name they cannot wear. But the priest persists. He corners you in the corridor the next morning, near the tapestry of St. Barbara. "My lady," he says, "if the child is born without name, there will be complications. For whom you ask? For the child? For the estate? For the court? Not for me." Then he frowns. You have influence. You must declare the father. You pause. Then you say, "God is the father. Let the child carry his name." The priest pales. That's not how it works. It's how it will. And you walk away, feeling the sharp thrum of your pulse in your throat. That night, you dream of names. Hundreds of them, each vanishing into mist as soon as you speak them. The falcon flies higher now. You watch her from the chapel roof. Her wings slicing the sky like a blade. She circles 3 times and disappears into cloud. You do not wait for her to return. You go back inside and draw a map, not of lands, but of time, months, weeks. The movement of the sun across your window, the sound of wind at dawn. You mark everything. You plan not a coronation, not a legacy, but a life. A small one, quiet, yours. The servants begin whispering again. This time about the child. They guess. They speculate. Some say it is your husband's. Others believe it's the knight's. Some claim it's not human at all, that a curse has settled on the castle. You hear them. You let them speak, because their words cannot touch you anymore. You have moved beyond rumor. You live in ritual now. Every day, the same motions: bath, walk, window, tea, fire. The rhythm is your sanctuary. Then, one evening, as you light the chapel candles, the steward appears. He holds something in his hands, awkwardly, reverently. "This was found," he says, "in the rookery." He hands it to you. A ribbon, dark blue, frayed at the edge. The same one your husband tied around the falcon's leg before his final campaign. You hold it gently, unsure how it returned. You say nothing. Just nod. Just take it. Just close the chapel door and sit beneath the Virgin's gaze and hold it in your lap like a question you no longer need answered. Later that night, you wrap the ribbon around your wrist. Not tightly, just enough to feel it there. You do not wear it for mourning. You wear it for memory. You wear it because he is slipping and you are changing. And somewhere between the two, a new name will be born. One not yet spoken, one that does not belong to the past. And for the first time since winter began, you sleep through the night without dreaming. You wake to birdsong, not the falcon's scream or the restless caw of crows along the battlements, but something gentler larks, maybe, or sparrows nesting near the garden wall. It's strange, hearing something soft again. Stranger still is how your body responds, not with dread, not with the heaviness that has greeted every other morning, but with a kind of unfamiliar steadiness. You press your hand to your belly and feel the weight there, undeniable now, like a sentence halfway through its writing. You do not panic, you do not weep, you simply breathe. Then you rise. The morning air is crisp, but not cruel. The frost on the window pane has melted into threads of water, dripping like slow tears toward the sill. You open the shutters wide and let the breeze in. It smells of earth, of thaw, of something beginning. Downstairs, the hall is quiet. The servants move like ghosts, careful not to disturb you, though no one says why. They've stopped looking at your face directly, as if it holds something sacred or dangerous. You eat breakfast, slowly salted porridge, dried apple, honey on a small piece of bread. The food tastes like something again. Not joy, exactly, but survival. Your fingers no longer tremble when you hold the cup. The child inside you has grown quiet today, sleeping, perhaps, or listening. You imagine a small ear pressed against the wall of your womb, hearing the slow rhythms of this place, footsteps, crackling fires, your voice humming to yourself in moments you didn't realize you were singing. Later, you visit the garden, even though the hedges are still bare and the ground is patchy with leftover snow. You walk the old paths in your heavy cloak, the one with the fur-lined hood, the one he gave you the first winter after your wedding. It still smells faintly of cedar and cloves, though you've had it aired many times. You sit on the stone bench near the sundial, fingers splayed over your middle, and watch the light shift across the ground. Time no longer feels cruel. It just feels quiet. There's no schedule, no procession, no great task. Only breath, only pulse. You trace the shape of a leaf with your boot and think, I am still here. When you return inside, the steward is waiting. He bows and holds out a letter. You recognize the seal, your father's. You take it without speaking, retreat to the solar, and sit by the fire before breaking the wax. The parchment inside is thicker than before, the ink darker. There are no greetings, no apologies. Only this: I have arranged a match. The night will arrive by midsummer. Be prepared. There's no name, but you know who he means. Alaric, the one who brought the shield, the one who smiled too slowly, the one whose hand you've never taken, but who still moves through your imagination like an unwelcome shadow. You fold the letter and place it on the mantle. You do not burn it, not yet. You sit by the fire and think of options, of consequences, of power. A woman with child is considered vulnerable. A woman with land is considered valuable. A woman with both a target. You close your eyes and breathe in through your nose. The fire crackles beside you. The falcon lands outside your window, claws scraping gently against the ledge. You open your eyes and say aloud, he is not welcome. The bird doesn't move, just stares. That evening, you write your reply. It is short. This is my house now, my name, my body. You do not own them. You seal it with wax and press his old ring into the center, not to honor him, but to remind your father what he gave away the day he wed you. You hand the letter to the steward and say, see, it leaves with the morning cart. He does not ask questions. He has learned not to. The midwife notices the tension in your shoulders. She offers tea, a warm cloth, a walk in the cloisters. You decline them all. What you need cannot be brewed or soothed or walked away. What you need is space. Space to become the person you are slowly becoming. A woman who answers to no one. A mother who will name her child after no man. That night, you do not sleep. You sit by the window and watch the moon slide across the sky. You speak to your child not with stories, not with promises, but with the truth. I don't know who you are, you whisper, but you're not here to replace anyone. You're not a legacy. You're not redemption. You're not a weapon. You're mine. And if you choose to stay, I will not let the world make you into anything else. The next day, the priest arrives again. He He has a different tone this time, quieter, almost reverent. He brings with him a small silver cross and asks if he might bless the child. You think of saying no, but then you think of the child, and how even symbols sometimes help us carry what we cannot name. You nod. He performs the ritual quickly, murmuring in Latin, eyes closed. When he finishes, he looks at you and says, "You will be remembered." You tilt your head. For what? For choosing your own silence. You smile, thin and tired. It's not silence. It's waiting. But not for him anymore. You begin to write again. Not letters, not ledgers, stories. In the quiet hours before dawn, you write tales of women in towers who rescue themselves, of birds who forget how to return, of queens who bury their crowns and walk into the forest. No one sees these stories. You do not plan to share them. They are not for the world. They are for the child. For the day when the world begins asking who their father was, when the world tries to shape them with legacy and blood. You will hand them these stories instead, and say, choose the one that feels most like truth. By the third month, the child kicks, not lightly, not shyly. You laugh aloud, startled, hand pressed over the spot, so you are awake. You murmur, good, stay that way. You begin talking more, not to the people, to the air, to yourself, to the old paintings in the hall, to the ghost that may or may not still pace your husband's study. You feel less lonely now, not because anyone has come, but because something has taken root, and it will not be ignored. Spring begins to press at the walls, buds on the trees, meltwater along the path. The sky no longer sags with snow. You open the windows. The castle breathes again. You walk longer, slower, trailing your hand along the warm stones. You plant herbs in the garden, even though it is too early. The midwife warns you the frost might kill them. You shrug, let them try. And then, one morning, a letter arrives. Not from your father, from the knight himself, Alaric. It is written in clean script, unfolding with poison charm. I look forward to being of service, to both you and the child. I am glad to offer the name your household lacks. You burn it, immediately. You watch the flames curl around each letter and say aloud, we lack nothing. The midwife hears you and says nothing. Later, she offers you boiled milk and does not mention the smell of smoke that lingers in your sleeves. That night, you lie in bed and speak to the ceiling. You're not a scandal. You're not a secret. You're not shame. The words echo off the stones and return to you softer, stronger. You sleep well. You dream of a girl with your eyes and no last name. She is laughing, and no one asks who she belongs to, because she is not a question, she is an answer. The blood comes just before dawn, warm and silent, like betrayal wrapped in linen. You wake to the sensation before you see it, and for a moment, your mind refuses to understand. You sit up slowly, the sheet clinging to your legs, and you place your hand between your thighs as if reaching for certainty. When you pull it back, your fingers are wet. The moonlight is still stretched across the floor in thin ribbons, catching on the edge of the basin, the hem of your discarded shawl. You do not scream. You do not call for help. You only sit there, one hand resting on your stomach, the other trembling in your lap, your breath shallow and strange. Then you rise, carefully, with dignity. You do not rush. The blood drips as you move across the room, dotting the stone like a message written in a language you once understood. You open the chamber door and step into the corridor barefoot. The stones are cold, but you hardly feel them. The castle is still asleep. You think, absurdly, that the falcon will wake before the servants do. At the end of the hallway, you knock once on the midwife's door, then again, louder. She opens it within seconds, as if she has been waiting. Her eyes fall to your hands, and her mouth becomes a line. She does not ask questions, she only moves. The next hour passes in a blur of water, cloth, hushed instructions. You lie in the center of your bed, knees drawn up, body tense. The pain hasn't come yet, just the bleeding, just the strange emptiness. You stare at the ceiling, waiting to feel something. A cramp, a contraction, a reason, but nothing comes. Only the midwife's whisper. It may not pass yet. It may still hold. You almost laugh. It may still hold. As if this child were a jewel clutched in a thief's palm. You turn your face to the wall and close your eyes. The smell of blood is stronger now, sweet and coppery, filling the room like incense. The priest arrives uninvited. You hear his footsteps before you see him, the soft murmur of his robes brushing the stone, the clink of a chain around his neck. He enters and begins to pray before you've spoken a word. You open your eyes and say, "Stop." He hesitates. No. You interrupt, voice steady. Let the room be quiet. And to your surprise, he listens. He folds his hands and bows his head. And for the first time since your husband's death, the chapel silence finds you in your own bed. The bleeding slows, then starts again, then stops. The pain comes in waves, distant at first, then sharp, like the flick of a knife across skin already torn. You grip the sheets and breathe through your teeth. The midwife murmurs words you don't quite hear. You nod at all of them, because what else is there to do? You are not dying. Not yet. But something inside you is, and you have no choice but to let it go. It happens late in the evening, nearly a full day after the first drop. You feel the shift before it arrives, the deep, final cramp. The body's exhausted surrender. The midwife takes something from between your legs, wraps it quickly, says nothing. You do not ask. You do not look. You know, she leaves the room with it, and you are left with a basin of water gone pink and the taste of iron in your mouth. You fall asleep not out of peace, but from collapse. When you wake, the room is empty. The window is open. The fire has burned low. Your body feels wrong hollow, but swollen, aching, but numb. You move slowly, pressing your hand against the mattress to push yourself upright. The blood is gone from your legs. The sheets have been changed. The shawl on the chair is folded neatly, untouched. You swing your feet to the floor and pause. For the first time in months, your hands drift to your stomach and find nothing. No movement, no tension, only flesh, only loss. The door creaks. The midwife enters with broth and bread, setting them down gently without meeting your eyes. You thank her, and she nods once before leaving. The food smells of thyme and salt. You drink it, you eat, not because you want to, but because it feels like what the living do. You finish it all, then push the tray aside and sit by the window. The falcon is gone today. The sky is pale and cloudless, like a sheet waiting to be stained. By afternoon, the steward appears. He brings another letter. You don't open it. You hand it back. "No more," you say. He bows and leaves. You walk the corridor, slowly, pressing your palm to the walls as if to feel the castle's pulse. The silence follows you, but it no longer comforts. You descend the stairs, step into the chapel, and sit in the last pew without speaking. The candles flicker. The Virgin's painted face stares down, impassive. You do not pray. You do not light a flame. You only sit, hands folded in your lap, feeling your body settle around the absence. Historians still argue whether noblewomen mourned privately or were paraded in veils for court sympathy. No one mentions the days after a loss. No one names. No one writes about the hours when your hands keep moving just to stay warm. You return to your chamber that night and stare at the fire, wondering what part of you has ended. Not just the child, but a shape you were beginning to imagine. A version of the future now erased. You don't cry. Not yet. The tears are waiting, tucked somewhere between your spine and your throat, but they remain still. You think of the tiny robe you had sewn weeks ago. A simple thing, pale blue. You hid it in your chest. You retrieve it now, not to burn, not to bury, but to hold. You press it to your cheek and whisper, "I would have loved you, no matter whose you were." And then, very softly, "I still do." The midwife returns the next morning. She tells you it was early enough that it won't be spoken of. No one will ask questions. You can still marry, she says gently. like a gift. You shake your head. Not again. She nods once, then heal. That word, heal, lingers longer than the others, like a bell still ringing in an empty hall. You spend the next few days in silence. The servants resume their tasks, footsteps lighter than before. The cook adds lavender to your meals. The steward avoids your eyes. You resume your walks. You read nothing. You write nothing. You stand by the window and watch for birds. They do not come. One afternoon, a child in the courtyard drops a pail of water and begins to cry. The sound cuts through you like glass. You close the shutters. You do not open them again until morning. On the 5th day, you return to your loom. The threads are tangled, the pattern half finished. You sit down, hands uncertain. Then you begin again. A new thread, a new line, not to distract, not to forget, but to mark the space, to acknowledge the shape of the loss, not as a whole, but as a line added to the fabric, something real, something woven. The falcon returns on the 7th morning. She lands outside the chapel and waits. You walk to her slowly, offer your arm. She hesitates, then steps forward. Her weight steadies you. You lift your chin to the sky and whisper, "You came back." She blinks, and somewhere inside you, a breath begins to loosen. That night, you write a letter, not to your father, not to the priest, to yourself. You have endured. You're still enduring. And though the room is emptier now, you have not disappeared. You fold it and place it in the drawer. Beside the others, you light a candle. You do not look away from the flame. And finally, you let yourself weep. You rise later now, not out of indulgence, but in quiet rebellion. The castle no longer dictates your time. You wake when your body says to, not when the bells demand. Morning does not rush at you anymore. It lingers, misted and soft, filtered through the gauze of thin clouds and wood smoke. The tapestries on the wall still hang crooked from when the maids last cleaned. But you leave them be. You like the way they lean, like something finally honest. You dress slowly, not in morning black or the stiff brocades your husband once favored, but in a wool gown dyed in soft gray, the color of rain before it falls. Your hair you leave unbound, for no one is coming to inspect you, and for once, the wind is free to play with it as it pleases. You look in the mirror and don't search for signs of grief anymore. You simply look, and you recognize yourself. Not entirely, but enough. Outside, the garden has begun its cautious bloom. The first crocus dares to peek from the edge of the herb beds. You kneel beside it, your knees dampening in the thawed soil, and whisper, "Brave little fool." It does not answer, but it doesn't need to. Its answer is in its color, the outrageous purple against brown, the choice to exist anyway. You press 2 fingers gently to its stem and let it go. Behind you, the castle door creaks open. You do not turn. You know they'll wait for you now. Later that day, you speak with the steward. You tell him to repair the eastern wall where the vines have begun to claw through. You tell him to prepare the guest rooms, not for visitors, but for light open the shutters. Let them breathe again. He says nothing, but you notice the surprise in how his pen stills over the ledger. You say, "This place will not rot just because no man rules it." And he bows, slowly, not from fear, from something closer to respect. That afternoon, you take a walk alone beyond the gate. The guards hesitate, but you wave them off. The path through the forest is still wet from last week's rain, but the trees smell green again. Your boots sink with each step, but you keep walking, deeper, until the castle disappears behind the branches. You reach the river, the one he crossed that first time he left for war, the one they say still carries his echo. You sit on the old stone near the bend and listen. No echo comes, only water and wind, and the wings of unseen birds above. You take a small bundle from your satchel, cloth, blue, that ribbon from long ago, the one he tied to the falcon. You've kept it all this time, not as a tether to him, but to the you who once believed he'd return. You tie it to a branch overhanging the water and let it flutter. Then you whisper not his name, Not a prayer, just a sound. A breath pushed out like an exhale too long held. You stand, you turn, and you walk home. Historians still argue whether widowed noblewomen lived as queens or prisoners after their husbands' deaths. Some claim they wielded vast power, controlled estates, raised heirs. Others insist they were tucked away in shadowed rooms, silenced by grief and propriety. But what no chronicle captures is the subtle transformation that happens when a woman no longer waits, when she stops listening for hoofbeats in the night, when she turns inward, not in mourning, but in reclamation. Back at the castle, you begin to write again. This time, not stories, not dreams, instructions, decrees. A new seal is carved. No raven, no sun, just a single sprig of yarrow wrapped in a circle. You press it into wax with a steady hand and send it on letters that bear only your name. No titles, no lineage, just the truth you are the one who remains. The midwife leaves the following week. Her duty is done, though her eyes linger on your face before she goes. You'll be all right, she says, handing you a pouch of dried herbs and something she will not name, in case you need to forget anything. You shake your head. I don't want to forget, just to carry it better. She smiles, and this time, it's real. Then she walks down the steps and disappears into the dust of the road, her form shrinking until even her shadow is gone. You spend more time in the solar now. The loom sings again under your fingers, not mournfully, but with purpose. You stitch not just patterns, but stories into the fabric and hidden shapes, symbols only you will know. A bird mid-flight, a door half open, a figure standing alone but unbowed. Each thread is an act of defiance, a refusal to be erased. The priest visits one last time. You meet him in the courtyard, your arms crossed, your eyes steady. He begins to speak, and you stop him with a look. I no longer need forgiveness, you say, nor blessing. He hesitates. But you must think of your soul. You smile. I think of it often, and it's quieter without you in it. He doesn't argue. He bows and leaves, and the chapel, for the first time in seasons, becomes your space again. One night, weeks later, a storm lashes the castle. Thunder peels the sky open. Rain hammers the windows. You lie in bed listening to it, eyes open, hands still. You remember a time when storms frightened you, when you would curl into his arms and feel protected. Now, you lie alone, and it does not feel like lack. It feels like survival. You whisper into the dark, I am not broken, and the storm does not answer. It doesn't have to. Spring fully arrives. The crocuses multiply. The vines creep up the walls with renewed hunger. You let them. You walk the halls without armor now. No grief pinned to your sleeves. No longing tightening your throat. The servants smile when they pass you. One of the maids even laughs. The sound surprises both of you. What is it, you ask? It's just, she says. You don't look haunted anymore. You nod. I was never haunted, just waiting for myself to return. One afternoon, a merchant arrives. He offers bolts of silk, jars of honey, trinkets from the east. You buy none of it, but you watch his daughter, a girl no older than 14, ride confidently beside him. Her braid swinging like a banner, she meets your eyes without fear. You nod, and she nods back. That night, you write another story about a girl who lives in a tower but who builds stairs, one stone at a time, until the world below becomes hers. You begin preparing the castle for summer. The halls are scrubbed, the banners mended, not for guests, not for court, for yourself, because you deserve beauty, because silence is not the same as stillness, because the echo of loss can be softened by the presence of new rituals. You eat better, you sleep longer, you find a rhythm that belongs to you alone. You visit the rookery. The falcon is gone, perhaps for good. You don't wait for her return. Instead, you look to the sky and thank her for staying, for leaving, for reminding you that even those who soar must sometimes rest. At dusk, you sit at the highest tower, not to watch, not to hope, just to be below. The castle breathes. The wind moves through its stones like a song with no words. You close your eyes. You place your hand over your heart, and you say, not aloud, not to anyone you survived. You returned. You became. The moon rises without urgency, casting long, silver ribbons across the castle floor. Somewhere in the courtyard below, a door swings softly in the wind, opening and closing with no destination. You sit in the quiet, deeper now than sleep, your breath slowing with the air, all the names that once filled this place, his, yours. The child's drift like threads loosed from the loom. They do not vanish. They settle. They become part of the stone. You press your fingers to the cool window pane, tracing a shape there, a circle, perhaps, or a spiral. No one would understand it if they saw. But it's not for them. It's not even for him. It's for you, the woman who waited, who mourned, who bled, who rose again with no witness but the sky. The castle will not tell your story. The histories will not write your name. But that's all right. The ones who need to know will feel it. In the garden, in the silence, in the way the light falls a little warmer on the old stone steps. Tonight, the stars do not blaze. They hum, soft, distant, steady. You fold yourself into bed, not with sadness, but with stillness, the kind earned only by those who have watched every promise disappear and still chosen to stand. So close your eyes now. Let the falcon fly. Let the names fade. Let the quiet hold you. And tomorrow, when you wake, may you rise not as who you were, but as who you've always been. Finally remembered. Good night.